Welcome to Inside the Castle, the podcast that goes behind castle doors to have real conversations with real people about solving the nation's toughest challenges. I'm one of your hosts today, Aaron Snyder.
And I'm Angie Fryerman.
In this episode, we're discussing the Section 202 program. With us today are Brandon Moore and Michael Moore. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be with you today.
So starting with Brandon, then moving to Michael, could you two just tell us about yourselves and your role at the Corps, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the Section 202 program?
Yeah, sure, Aaron. Yeah, hi. My name's Brandon Moore. I work in the Huntington District. I wear a couple different hats. One is as a section chief for our auxiliary project management section. In Huntington, that section was stood up whenever we got an influx of funding and projects through the Bipartisan Budget Act of 18 and the Disaster Relief Act of 19. So, within my section is, that subset of project in which in Huntington, we've got 7 projects that were funded completion through that appropriation, which is a great opportunity to expedite our project delivery. So it's really good work, exciting work with the teams there. So I'm the program manager for the Emergency Supplemental Program in Huntington. Also, as is relevant today, I'm the Section 202 program manager. Been with the Corps about 13 years now. Been around ops and in project program management now, and really like working with the teams to deliver these projects.
Good morning. My name is Michael Moore. I'm a project manager for the Louisville District. I've been leading teams of other engineers and scientists to design and build large projects for the nation for decades. I'm a project manager. As a project manager, I'm responsible for ensuring our team provides the best engineering solution as efficiently as possible, including scope, schedule, and budget, of course.
So, Brandon, could you just tell us what Section 202 is? And I know within the Corps, sometimes it's like we just say section this, section that. Could you tell our listeners what Section 202 actually is?
Yeah, sure. The program was authorized via Section 202 of Public Law, basically the word of 81. So it's Section 202 of the Word of Bill in 1981 is authorizing legislation. So that's kind of where that comes from. Now, as far as the program, it's really unique in a couple of aspects. So it was authorized as a result of 1977 flooding in the eastern Kentucky, southern West Virginia, and southwestern Virginia area. So that's what spurred Congress to act with that legislation. What's really unique about the 202 is maybe 3 things. It authorizes flood risk management to that flood elevation of 77 event across 3 named watersheds. So that watershed in totality, again, in eastern Kentucky, southern West Virginia, southwestern Virginia, that is the Levisa and Tug Fork, the Big Sandy River, and the Cumberland River. That program area is about the size of Connecticut from a square mileage standpoint. So it's very broad in its authorization. The other thing that's kind of unique about it for people that are familiar with Corps legislation is there's really no strict limit to the authorization. It says that the costs exceed the benefits. That's written into the legislation. So no strict BCR requirement. And then it's authorized to be appropriated such sums as may be necessary. So there's no cap on the authorization. So really unique. Now, when you look at the watershed, how do we get after providing flood risk management to that wide area? It's through a mixture of study to feasibility level, and then we go into what's the most cost effective, whether it's structural, such as a levee, which Michael is leading a team to award and construct a levee around the Paintsville area in Johnson County. So we have levees. We've constructed 10 levees at this point. We've got 4 more in the portfolio of the program. Also non-structural. So in less densely populated communities where it's not cost effective to build a levee, acquisitions, so buyouts, or flood proofers where we kind of raise them in place above that flood elevation. That's all outlined in a detailed project report, and that kind of defines the scope of the project. Now, to date, the program has basically implemented $1.6 billion worth of flood risk management across that area, with approximately $2.6 billion left across 10 to 12 counties. So a lot of work that's been done, a lot of capability for more. And one thing to maybe also point out is that this program area is economically disadvantaged across the whole area. So it does align with the administration's priorities for environmental economic justice. There's frequent flash flooding. So with the 77 event, we may think, well, that was a while ago, but there is recurring flood risk in this area. I mean, for those who may have been familiar with the news reports, there was devastating floods in eastern Kentucky earlier this year. I think news reports there's 37 fatalities, untold millions in damages, and FEMA declared a disaster in that area. So it's a recurring flood risk that we're trying to reduce in the area, and economically disadvantaged. It can potentially spur economic development and also, get the public out of harm's way. So kind of sum it up, it's a broad authority across those watersheds, kind of unique in the way that it's implemented and studied, and plenty more work to be done in the program. And we're happy to share any lessons learned for listeners on the non-structural side. We've implemented, we've done 1,400 flood proofers, 1,500 buyouts across the program to date. Really enjoy working in these communities and delivering the project benefits to the public to reduce that flood risk.
Thank you for that explanation, Brandon. I have heard specifically about the Johnson County 202. So, Michael, could you tell us a little bit about those?
Yes, Angela. The Johnson County Section 202 Flood Risk Management Project, as Brandon said, is 100% cost shared by the funding made available by the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. The purpose of Johnson County Section 202 project is to implement flood risk management measures to protect residences and properties within the floodplain of the Levisa Fork and its tributaries within Johnson County, Kentucky. As Brandon mentioned, without the project, we're trying to prevent the reoccurrence of the April 1977 flood event, which was catastrophic in that area. For implementation purposes, so you get a broader picture of what we're doing in Johnson County, we have, as Brandon mentioned, we have both structural and non-structural measures going on. For the entirety of Johnson County, we're developing a flood warning emergency evacuation plan. The purpose of that is providing early flood warnings to allow residents time to evacuate safely. We also have two other phases of the Johnson County project that are structural in nature and include, as Brandon said, levees and flood walls to reduce the flood risk to the city of Paintsville.
And, one thing I might like to just add, Michael, is with respect to the program area, and it's within Huntington District. Also, that watershed, the watersheds that we mentioned earlier, the Cumberland River particularly is in Nashville District. Michael is in Louisville, and, as we got the BB18 funding in Huntington District, we got 4 projects funded to completion and a lot of work. And, our MSC, in conjunction with us, we reached out to Louisville to help us deliver these projects, kind of interoperably. So where do we have resources within the region, realizing that, we're kind of taxed with what we've been tasked to do by Congress. So Michael and the Louisville team's done a great job, as that Johnson County project, very nearing complete or award of the phase 2 project for the levee construction, and Nashville works alongside us as well. So it's really kind of also a showcase within USACE of, working across district boundaries and pulling our resources together to do what we can to expedite how we're delivering these projects.
Absolutely, Brandon. And we couldn't have done it without your all's oversight. You've had the 202 program since inception, and we've gained so much valuable knowledge from you. And as you said, we've worked with your district, with Nashville, with Buffalo, with Pittsburgh. It's definitely a multi-district team, as most of all of our projects are. In some aspects, you're reaching out to some other district for some expertise at some time along the way of the project, for sure.
So it's always great to hear that a region is leveraging the technical expertise and USACE staff across the region to execute projects and making sure that we can deliver them on time and within budget. So it's always great to hear these successes. As with any project that we work on, though, I'm curious to know what the challenges have been in executing the Section 202 work.
Particularly within the 202 program, one of our primary challenges and it's probably common to a lot of the projects, is real estate. So these are real estate driven projects. The flood proofing of individual structures and the acquisition of individual structures, every one of those actions are individual real estate actions. When we look at, and one thing I didn't mention or make clear earlier is the non-structural is voluntary. We have public landowner meetings to inform the public. We have an application period that we'll put a closing date on, and then we work with those individual landowners. And so, when we talk about putting schedules to these, we have some flexibility to drive schedule with respect to it. It is voluntary, but when you're talking about individual negotiations, those can be, it's based on appraised value, but our definition of fair market value may not match the homeowners, right? So we have some negotiations that happen there. But what's important to remember as we work through those individual actions is each one of those acquisitions or flood proofers does provide incremental flood risk to that individual landowner. So we're either buying them out and facilitating them buying a new house with the funds provided by the appraised value and public law 91-646 assistance, or we are raising them above that base flood elevation. So each one of those actions has its own fingerprint, and you got to work through them individually. So that's kind of what we see on the non-structural side. I may toss it over to Michael to see, kind of as a case study for Johnson County on the structural side, kind of what they've been working with and challenges they've experienced as they've worked to deliver that levee project.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, I'd say typically for a project of this size, whether it be Section 202 or not, a levee and construction project of this size, typically the major challenges that I've seen in my years is funding and LERDs, as Brandon mentioned, the LERDs. Since Johnson County was fully allocated the funding, we don't have that timely constraint of the funding as a challenge, but we do have the LERDs acquisitions. The non-federal sponsor is responsible for all of these acquisitions, and our non-federal sponsor, the Johnson County Fiscal Court, contracted with IRO, who's a top-notch right-of-way consultant to lead these efforts for over 100 parcels. It is definitely our critical path, and it will be until we get all the lands. As Brandon mentioned, we're waiting on making an award right now solely on waiting for the final negotiations to take place on some of these parcels.
And I'll just maybe add, Michael, one thing that I think that the Johnson County team's done really well is being thoughtful about prioritizing the real estate acquisition with that contractor, phasing the contract effort to coincide with when those LERDs maybe become available. One approach could be, hey, let's wait till we got all the LERDs and then build it, or we could say, hey, we can phase it to coincide with when the LERDs will be available. So that's kind of something that they've implemented there. And then on the last phase, the phase 3, we're looking at phase plus options or maybe kind of a limited work limit approach. So that's the definite advantage of having, like Michael said, those funds up front is we're not constrained by having incremental funds. So we can look and, kind of strategize what's the best approach. And so with LERDs being critical path, we've kind of worked, I think the team's kind of worked around like, how can we phase this to deliver it and coincide with when those LERDs may be available.
Thanks for talking about that. For our listeners out there, LERDs means land easements, rights of ways, and relocations. So kind of the real estate process that the Corps goes through. Talking about the LERDs and the real estate, so you said that was the non-federal sponsor's responsibility. Michael, could you tell us what is the sponsor's role in the Section 202 project and what kind of cost sharing are they responsible for?
Absolutely. For Johnson County, their cost sharing, we'll start with that in the second part of your question. The cost sharing is zero. It's 100% federally funded as long as we stay within the allocated funds for this project, which is $118 million. I'd say if we exceed that, I don't know if we'd have to go back and revise a PPA and there could be cost share implications. But at this time, we're within budget. Don't believe we're going to have that issue. As far as the roles and responsibilities of the non-federal sponsor, the Johnson County Fiscal Court, they've been alongside us since day one, trying to fully understand the issues and the obstacles, patient as we've developed the solution, and have helped tremendously in setting expectations for the community. like I said, their main two roles are providing the LERDs, and then when we construct and turn over the multiple phases of this project, the non-federal sponsor will be solely responsible for all the OMR, R&R.
So one of the reasons we started the podcast is to share lessons learned across the Corps with work like Section 202, which may not be used by every district or division in the Corps. And so I think this is a great opportunity for either one of you to share lessons learned that you would like to share with the team internally and externally.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, I'd say the biggest lesson learned, this is the first 202 project that Louisville District's ever had. So we had a steep learning curve to get up to speed with, and thanks to Brandon and everyone in Huntington District, we got there rather quickly. But the biggest lesson learned, I'd say, is to be proactive and ready to push the boundaries of existing policy. We've had to do that several times within this project, and I think it overlaps. It's like our new mentality that if we can do it on this project, why can't we do it on all of our other projects? So while merging risk-informed decision-making with the evolving practice of water resource planning, you have to plan ahead for what you know and what you don't know. And in the opening remarks by Mr. Durrett, who's the LRD business director, in 2018 when he provided us this project, he implored us to step out on the limb and push the boundaries, and we haven't stopped stepping out yet. I hope everyone that has the access and the availability to do so will take that lesson learned, is to, we have so many policies and they're general in nature because you can't have a policy for every exact situation. There's so many gray areas with all of these projects that, and I'm not saying there's loopholes in policies, but with risk-informed decision-making, the leaders can make a decision whether as an enterprise we want to take those risks or not.
Brandon, is there anything else you'd like to mention to our listeners before we wrap up for today?
Yeah, sure, Aaron. I might just pick up on as far as Michael's lesson learned, risk-informed decision-making. I think, that is definitely the charge for us in USACE right now. And I think one thing that we've learned at the PDT level and maybe the program manager level is just being transparent with those risks. So quantifying those risks for leadership. What does it mean from a cost, schedule, reputational risk standpoint, legal policy? If you come up with an idea and run through those wickets and think it's worth it from a schedule cost standpoint, then definitely go after it. And I think the Johnson County and also within the emergency supplemental program at large, we've had some success with that. And then I would also maybe add, Aaron, as far as working in disadvantaged communities, like Section 202 program does throughout, is, the sponsors are typically relatively strapped with respect to their resources and their time. So we're real thoughtful with how can we facilitate success. There are definitely boundaries we can't push as far as roles and responsibilities, but we do try to help them, lead them to the water, so to speak, with everything that we do. Early involvement, leading them to contractors like Johnson County team did. So that's really key to delivering projects within the disadvantaged community, I would say. So with that said, I think maybe I just leave the audience, anybody within USACE. Any further questions or lessons learned? Michael and I both are happy to follow up and definitely are committed to this program, and I want to share any lessons learned that we have for others who may find them useful.
Great. Thank you, Brandon and Michael, for joining us today for this edition of Inside the Castle. We appreciate you and your insights. To our listeners, we want to hear from you. What topics are important to you and people you're interested in hearing from. Until next time, be safe, be innovative, and be revolutionary.
Thanks for joining us for this Inside the Castle podcast. To provide your feedback, email us at cw.infrastructure.team@usace.army.mil. Stay tuned for additional Inside the Castle podcasts as we explore life inside the Corps and revolutionize civil works together.